but how we face it can define who we become on the other side. Welcome, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation is not just about grief. It is about the mysterious places it can take us, the healing we never expect, and the love that somehow remains. My guest today is Gregg Korbon. He's a physician whose life was forever changed by the profound and extraordinary story of his 9-year-old son, Brian. A healthy, brilliant, intuitive child who, in a way, few can fathom, seemed to know his time here would be brief. What followed was not only a father's deepest heartbreak, but also a journey into spiritual awakening, mystical experiences, and healing far beyond what science alone can explain. So, to all the listeners, if you have ever faced a loss, questioned why, or wondered how to find peace in the unimaginable, this episode will move you deeply because Greg's story reminds us that even in our most broken places, there is a potential for wonder. So let's open our hearts, hold space for the hard conversations, and explore the transformative power of grief. So, Greg, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Greg, okay, let's begin where it is generally very hard, where most people will feel completely disoriented the moment of loss. Um, as a father and physician, how did you initially process Brian's passing, especially given his foretelling of it?
Yes, you could talk forever about the effects of a gifted child like Brian and who foresaw his death. Just to let your audience know, he was 9 years old, and we were getting ready in January to celebrate his ninth birthday. And he said that he didn't want to celebrate it because his birthday party would bring his death closer, and he would not live to double digits, age 10. And he became very depressed. So I talk about in my book, Beyond Reason. Um, and all these paranormal things happened leading up to his death. Uh, he got very depressed. We worked with him. And then in the springtime, he started coming out of it and said it was time for his party. But he wanted it to be a happy spring party. So uh, 2 days before that, my wife was coming home, and Brian was carrying his little wagon with his toys and his camping gear and said it's time for him to go on his trip.
Okay.
And then Catherine said, "You can't go. You've got your party tomorrow." So they talked about it, and instead he pitched his tent, and and then with our dog, he spent the night, which was he'd always been afraid of the dark, but he had a good time. And then we had his party, which was his going away party. And then he went to his room and left some goodbye gifts for us, left a note telling us not to worry about him, went to go play in his baseball game. On the way there, he said he wanted to score a run more than anything. And he'd always been afraid of the ball.
Mhm.
Wasn't very good at baseball, but he got there and he was just the happiest kid, and he was not afraid at all. And he got up to bat and he got walked to first base. Next kid had a triple, and he ran home, and he was so happy that he scored his first run of his little league career. Gave his thumbs up, and then went into the dugout and collapsed. Okay, so there was all of this paranormal stuff that happened before, during, and after. And in order to understand it, I wrote the book, and only can include only some of it there. There was so much of it, but basically, uh, the things that happened was that Brian's love was kind of a guide, and the loss just led me in a completely new world. As an example, we would go to these support groups for parents that have lost children called Compassionate Friends. And after a year of talking and expressing our feelings, we told Brian's story and all the paranormal stuff that happened. And then the other parents chimed in with theirs too. And it turns out that there's a lot of, when you lose a loved one, there's lots of stuff that happens that people are afraid to talk about. So now, my particular experience was, in order to write all this, understand all these things, I kept writing it down and things kept happening more and more. Um, so I was led, it turns out I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and it's kind of a magical place. And I didn't know it until I started like being ready for teachers, and they like showed up right here in my backyard. So one common thing for parents that lost a child is you lose your fear of death, and it has nothing to do with your beliefs, but that's something when a dearly loved part of you is on the other side, for some reason you're no longer afraid of the veil. And so I decided I was going to start riding my bike to work, which I'd always been afraid to do because it was dangerous. Um, but I signed up for that, and I ended up going out to visit the guy who was teaching the course, and he lived right next to the Monroe Institute. So I don't know if you know about Robert Monroe, but he wrote in Charlottesville the very first books in the Western world on out of body experience was Robert Monroe, remote viewing, his son-in-law, Joe McMonagle, Life After Death. Um, that's Life After Life. Um, Raymond Moody, all those books started here in Charlottesville. And so I studied at the Monroe Institute with Bob Monroe, and a friend of his was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she actually moved down here and was part of the community. So I got to know her a little bit, and but the main person I learned from was a fellow named Joseph Chilton Pierce, and he lived off grid out in the middle of nowhere, but he was a friend of Bob Monroe, and Bob Monroe built his bought his the land next to Joe and built his institute down there because of his knowledge of Joe Pierce. Joe Pierce wrote the book Magical Child, and he used to spend his summers over in an ashram over in India. A very spiritual guy, and he would travel all around the world and meet all of these gifted children, most gifted children in the world, with these incredible abilities and stuff like that. So he became my teacher. And if you had anybody in the entire planet to be your teacher to help explain a magical child like Brian, it would be Joe Pierce, and he just showed up, just like they say. So, and then other people showed up too. So, um, now talking about grief, let me tell you some things in the book that I haven't seen anyplace else that might be helpful to um, to your listeners. And uh, the three dreams that come when you lose a loved one. And the first one is the pain dream. And that's when Brian died, and I tried to resuscitate him. I suppressed my emotions, but the dreams kept coming for the next couple weeks, taking me back to the scene where I felt everything, all the pain and everything, and the helplessness. And so that was very common. I heard that among the other parents and compassionate friends. Um, then the next dream was the after the shock goes away, and usually the shock lasts for a couple weeks. You can't eat, can't sleep, and everybody tries to get you to take medications to numb the pain. But I instinctively knew that I didn't want to do that. The pain was very important, and it was very important. It was going to lead me somewhere. I just knew that. And all the love. So, as time goes on, a lot of the love that you had for your loved one, which was conditional, my son, daughter, who was young, old, happy, sad, that all tends to go away. And what's left is the unconditional love that's always there. So the next dream is the I'm okay dream.
Mm.
When the shock goes away and, you reunite with your loved one in your dreams, and then they tell you that they're okay, that the only people suffering is you. They're happy as could be and well taken care of. And that pretty much all the people I know have had those kind of dreams too. And then the last dream, not everybody gets, but it usually happens years later after you've done a lot of healing. And that's the goodbye dreams. And that's where they come to you, you want to hold on to them, and they tell you it's time to let go, um, both for your journey and for them. And so I had that. And when you let go, you get something more. You don't know what it is. Brian could write beautiful poetry, and I could never do that. And then I began, a lot of people, the book has won several awards, and people have told me that it's well written and there's poetry in there, and I never could do that before. But out of the emptiness, um, all of this words would just start flowing. My heart would open, and the words would come down on paper. I didn't even understand them many times, except the fact that they were beautiful. And the feeling of a peace and wholeness that flowed from the emptiness that Brian left in my heart um, made these beautiful words that some of which are in the book. So I hope you enjoy them.
Wow. Ah, that is really really I can say endearing, and although it's unimaginable, but uh, it's grounding because uh, this is something which is beyond logic and science. Um, so I'm curious to know, Greg, that was there any part of you that initially resisted any interpretation beyond the medical explanation? Like, did it ever challenge your perception of the life after death?
Yes. I mean, you have to understand
Mhm.
that the universe was orchestrating in a way that all of these things were happening, all these weird things. Like about 2 weeks before Brian died, and he was coming out of his depression and deciding to have this going away party. Um, a, a Luna moth. I don't know if you have them there, but they're 10-inch moth, and I'd never seen one before. And there was a full moon, and it landed on his glass door of his bedroom at night. The full moon would shine on it and cast its shadow on the floor next to his bed, and it would tap, 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 tap all night. Um, Kind of a little bit like Edgar Allan Poe's the the tap, 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 um, the Raven, Nevermore, his Lost Lenore. Um, I mean, that was going on for 10 days right before he died. And just all this stuff was happening. The picture that we got of him that we had recently framed started fading. So my rational mind couldn't accept any of it, but it was obvious that there was a huge orchestration coming up to this gifted child, leaving us and having so much to teach us. And then just the day he died, I resuscitated him. I'm an anesthesiologist. That's what we do. And I looked at him and I thought, you know, uh, perfect. If you want to have a cardiac arrest, you want an anesthesiologist right there the rescue squad was right across the street, and they showed up in like a minute. And my rational mind was that, well, we should be able to get him right back. But I knew he wasn't coming back, that he'd finished his work here. And then uh, we took him to the emergency room, and uh, he died. Well, that's where we said goodbye to his body, and then went back to the baseball field where he died, and to get my car. And I reached up to wipe a tear from my eye, and it was the most beautiful spring day I'd ever seen. And the air was thick with sweet honeysuckle, and there were all these parties going around and happy children playing baseball. And it was the most beautiful day I ever saw. And I reached up to wipe a tear from my eye, and the sour smell of Brian's vomit. When you shock people, they vomit. They don't show that on TV. And then, you're doing the resuscitation, it gets on your hands. So the sour smell of the vomit combined with the sweet smell of the honeysuckle. And I had this experience where everything became much more vivid. I was totally at peace. The colors and the sounds were much brighter and clearer than I'd ever seen before. And I knew that, Brian was at peace. And the only other work to do was mine, that he'd finished his work here. So then we went home, we saw his goodbye gift and his sign he left for us. And that night, I went to go, he had a younger sister who was 7, who was autistic. She was one of the first wave of autism. So nobody really knew what she was. And I went in to try and explain that he wasn't coming home, that he was, up in heaven. And then all these other paranormal experiences happened. She said, "Oh, he not coming home?" "Oh," I said, "at dark." And then she looked up the ceiling and she got this wonderful smile on her face. And she said, "Oh, Brian see lights, you know?" And I thought, what can she see? And all of a sudden, the bed started vibrating, and I saw this huge river of rippling energy waves carrying us along. And I knew that Brian was still a part of it, and that it had always been there, but I could never see it before. So, I mean, so I just basically got drop kicked into all this other reality. I had no choice but to follow along and let the river carry me along. And I've had these amazing experiences. So, which, we'll talk about on the other show.
Of course, of course. Well, that is it may sound unbelievable to many, but personally, I definitely believe in that. And these kind of experiences, genuine spiritual experiences, they can be really, really, um, I can say, surprising yet transformative as well. Um, and Greg, um, there's a notion that grief evolves, but it never disappears. Do you believe you have fully healed from your loss, or is healing more about learning to embrace grief or like live alongside the grief?
Yes, that's a great question. Okay. Well, pain reveals and love heals. So pain's a portal. And if you have great love, it will take you places that you can't imagine. The intelligence that runs the world is much greater than, we can possibly imagine. Um, but you say, you believe it. One of the interesting things was that there were about 1,000 things that could be checked and verified. And I kept telling these reporters that would call, because it made all the national newspapers and national radio. Boy, did guys finally. I started talking about these things. Would you like to see a sign? To talk to the people, and nobody ever followed up on that until finally, about 15 years ago, there was a story corps, and they would take our story, and it was one of the more unusual stories, and it was a real stretch for them, but they checked it out.
Mhm.
But they were the first, and nobody no media would check out the story. And and yet he left behind 1,000 pieces of evidence that anybody who wanted to, who was, wanted to see if it was true or not, could easily do it.
Mhm.
But nobody would do it until StoryCorps. And even that was not as much as I'd hoped. They didn't talk to our close friends, just like if you get a security clearance, the agency will talk to everybody. Did you see that? Can I see it? Um, so that would be like if you're going for a top secret clearance. Um, uh, so, but that's the interesting thing, was that the media would
Mhm.
not pursue the story.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that how you um, put it into words. Pain reveals and love heals. That itself, that's just single line and a few words, but it is so profound, so profound. Um, and a bit of a contradictory perspective into this, Greg. Some might argue that finding meaning in loss is a way of a psychological way of coping mechanism rather than a reflection of any actual reality beyond death. Um, I absolutely do not agree with this, but yet just making it more of a nuanced discussion. How do you respond to skeptics who say that these spiritual experiences are simply the mind's way of protecting itself?
Okay, well, yeah, let's see. Okay, well, let me just answer your first question before, and then that one. And the answer is no. The grief never goes away. The emptiness never goes away. After this, it'll take me a day you know, to be able to engage the world. Just getting back in the story takes me back to the emptiness. Even though wonderful things have come from it, it's like still there. It's a huge part of me, and and it takes a lot to get back into it, and then you have to recover before you get back to the real world. And then as far as skepticism, uh, all the world's a stage, and in order to be able to be on the stage, you need limited awareness. And skeptics are holding on to that limited awareness. If you're going to have free will, then you have to have limited awareness. And so, in order to be able to do what they need to do on stage, so would I try and take that away from them? No. If they're ready to give it up, I'm glad to talk to them. But I mean, that's where I was too. I was very skeptical. So it's are you familiar with the Adam and Eve story, the Garden of Eden? Taking the bite of the apple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, so uh, it wasn't so much that the fruit it wasn't the apple; it was a fruit of the tree of knowledge and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm,
It was the bite. So they just took a bite of it.
mm,
So you start creating duality, limited awareness. That's what creates our that's what creates our awareness, or I mean our our reality. And the snake, how does a snake eat? It's that was speaking to Adam and Eve. It
mm.
eats everything whole.
Yeah.
So it has whole awareness. So in order to enter our world of limited reality, create space and time, create a story structure, the arrow of time, that takes bite after bite after bite after bite after bite, where our awareness gets very small, very limited, but that creates free will, or sort of the illusion of free will, and which, of course, is absolutely essential for any story. The hero of the story has to have free will.
True. Oh, oh, okay, okay. So, Greg, wow. I know, I know. Before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and explore more about your book and the way around grief and loss, what will be the best way?
Right. If they go, they can get the book on Amazon, Beyond Reason, Lessons for Loss of the Gifted Child. And then there's also beyondreason.info, which they can get in touch with me. And it's got some more information. It's got several people who've written songs about Brian's life that are very beautiful, some interviews, um, and some extra stuff on there. So beyondreason.info, and they can get in touch with me and learn a little more about the book.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And thank you. Thank you so much, Greg, for this conversation and
Thank
for
you. I really appreciate it. You've been a wonderful host.
absolutely. And thank you for kind words. And thank you for reminding us that even in the deepest heartbreak, there's definitely space for connection, mystery, and enduring love that continues to guide us. As very well summed up, pain reveals, love heals. I'm going to retain this with myself forever. So thank you so much, Craig.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.
So, to all the listeners, if today's conversation touched you, I encourage you to reflect gently and remember that healing isn't about forgetting, it is about learning how to carry the love forward. Thank you to everyone for joining us on the Mindful Living. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, asking you to take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you.